Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir.
So this is a little bit of recap of the last class where we started to understand about the bias and variance in the machine learning. So this is a question of how good we approximate versus how good we generalize. So how good we approximate means that you have a hypothesis set and you are finding the particular final hypothesis from that hypothesis set with respect to the data points or the training examples that are handed over to you. In machine learning, that is primarily your job. Now, the hypothesis that you find out from the hypothesis set, how well or how close it is to the unknown target function is the first questions that is the approximation questions that we try to ask. And that we also call in colloquial machine learning term as the bias of that hypothesis, that the hypothesis is how much biased towards finding a solution which can approximate it. On the other hand, we also have seen that if the hypothesis set or the model being too complex, then it is difficult to find the actual or the best hypothesis, even if it is within the realms of the hypothesis set. Because the question is that you will only be going to find that particular best hypothesis through your data points, nothing else. So there the challenge lies, and we say that many times, even if our hypothesis set is very expressive, but we somehow underplay and find out a hypothesis which is not the best. So therefore, the best hypothesis and what we find out, this difference is the question of how well we generalize. So this is the approximation versus generalization question, and this generalization factor we also capture in terms of what we call as variance. And we try to find out a formal expression for that. When we try to find out the average hypothesis from the hypothesis set, it is nothing but a particular hypothesis is basically comes out from the given training example or the data points that are supplied to you. So whatever hypothesis we could find out from any of these set D, if I take an expected value of that, that is the expected best hypothesis, or we call it as an average hypothesis in that set. And if you remember, usually we call something expectations of x for a function fx is if the x ranges within the domain of from a to b, then usually we calculate fx using this formula, x into fx dx. We integrate it over the from a to b. If from a to b the range is continuous, and if the range is discrete, we just give a summation and put an average of that. Okay, that's all from the probability side you need to know, or you need to refresh with. Now, what we want the E out, that is the out of sample estimation of error with respect to the hypothesis G that we found out. Remember, G could be anything depending on the data point that is given to you. It is not a particular data point, but depending on all the data points, your G could be different. So we need an expected out of sample performance. For that, we have seen that what is a particular sample performance minus its difference, we assume a sum squared error for convenience. And then what we did is that we took an expected value and we have these computations where we put a minus g bar x plus g bar x in between and had a square, cross term cancels. And finally, we reach in a scenario where this is the term which says that how good you are generalizing with respect to the hypothesis that you find. So how far it is from the best hypothesis in that particular set that could be found out. And this term is saying that how good is your hypothesis set in making the best hypothesis from it, whether it approximates properly the function, the target function that is unknown to us. So which means that the first term is actually the variance. If we take it over every possible x and take the expected value, the first term is the variance and the second term is the bias, because it says that how hypothesis is being biased so that the best one is also far away from fx, how far it is. And this says that how can you generalize by choosing a hypothesis with respect to your best hypothesis. So assuming that best hypothesis generalizes best, so how better you are generalizing it. And also we have seen pictorially what happens if your hypothesis set become too complex, that is you allow many possible hypotheses, then what will happen is that finding out G bar X is difficult, so you have a high variance. However, your G bar X, maybe this hypothesis set contains the target function itself and G bar X is sufficiently close to it, so it's a low bias but high variance. Whereas in this case where your hypothesis model is very restricted, there you may easily find out the best one by navigating through the hypothesis space. Therefore, your variance is very low. However, it may be the case that this hypothesis is far away from the actual target function. So your bias might be higher. So practical experience suggests that if you complicate the model to find out, that is you complicate the hypothesis set, your bias goes down because there is higher chance that your target function will be inside that model and you could find it. However, your variance goes up because you need to still search, and the restriction of search is that you can only search through the data points given to you. And that's what we say that this is a bias versus variance trade-off. And we also call it as an approximation versus generalization trade-off. And we have seen that with respect to expected error, there is a relation between this generalization and this bias and variances in a curve-like manner. So there we ended our last lecture. So some questions has been raised in the last class that somebody has also foresee the factor that there is a relation between such kind of a bias and variance in their overfitting. So today that's why we will discuss a little bit on the overfitting. First, we'll try to see the examples that how we can determine overfitting, and then gradually we will proceed that what does overfitting means in terms of a noisy scenario and a noise-free scenario. And then the question that one of your friend raised, I will try to put it up here, that what is the interrelation between this kind of bias and variance equation, and mathematically we will see that indeed it has a relation with the overfitting as well. Okay, so let's start. So let's say that I have a very simple target function, and since I do not know the target function, just I will give you some data points for it. So let's say I have this is my x and this side is my y, and let's say I give you the data point. So let's suppose my target function is this one, which I do not know, very simple one, which I do not know, and I give you certain data points that which are five. Let's say I give you 5 data points which are a little bit noisy. So a little noise, I mean not drastically it will impact the performance of your final hypothesis, but I am saying a little noise I have. So therefore the target function does not have this particular data point over it because it had some noise, target function plus some noise. And now I need to fit it, this 5 data points, with some kind of a curve. So as you can see that my overall goal would be to minimize the E in almost towards 0. So I have 5 points to fit, and therefore my immediate conclusion is from this that let me take in my hypothesis set consist of 4th order polynomial, because 4th order polynomial is most likely to fit all these 5 points very perfectly. And when you do that, sometimes you may get this kind of a curve. Sorry, I'm drawing it a little bit weird. Let's say you fit it this way. So 4th order polynomial may look like this, and you fit your points. So let me just bold my point so that it becomes over the line. You fit these points in this way. Now, as you can easily understand here, your E in is basically these things, contributes to your E out, that how bad you are doing with respect to the target function is contributed by, and here, right? So therefore you can easily find out that while taking this one, I may find that E out is indeed very bad. Now if you try to look very carefully that what has happened, and that has given this thing a little bit bad shape, because I have tried to fit as much as possible with E in equal to 0. The point is, see, there is some noise in the point, and when you try to fit your final hypothesis according to that noise, so you are also trying to fit in the noise instead of only the points. That's point number one. So this is basically, it results, basically I can say that this is a kind of overfitting, I would say, which, and it results to bad generalization, as you can see, because my E out is very bad. So I could say generalization, it's a very bad generalization. And if you try to draw that how the E in and E out behavior in this case is dictated by, then suppose this side you put the number of points, I would say epochs. Now we know what the epochs is. And this side, I will, if I put the error, you will figure out that your E in, let's say, will start decreasing like this, and your E out. Now see what has happened after this point. Now after this point, I have seen that my E in is still coming low. However, my E out is not as good as it is. So the generalization behavior from this point to this point, before and after, is getting bad. So if you look at the omega, that is the difference between E in and E out boundary, that generalization is going bad. So at that point, I understand that there is no more that I could do with respect to this kind of a fitting. So which means that E in, if I try to fit very large with a large number of data points, and gradually at each epoch I keep on training and pushing down the E in using gradient descent or whatever else, I will suddenly see there is a point where my E out is not behaving as intended, and it is going up. So that is the point where you, that means this many examples after that you are trying to overfit. So this is an indication. So formally, we say that when my E out will go up, irrespective of my E in is coming down, then at this scenario, I see there is an overfit. And as you can see from this figure, if we have such kind of a graph and a validation data with us, from this figure, what we derive is that why should we go beyond this to fit? We will try to fit it within this position, and we will stop. This is called as early stopping. This is a thing that we often do to eliminate the type of overfitting that we require. We will deal with this details when we do for the validation and regularization. But this is something that we need to be very worried about. So looking at these two figures and a little bit thought about our noise and all. So here you can say that the noise is the main culprit, because when you look for the noise, the thing is that the hypothesis that you are trying to project is trying to do two things. One, it is trying to fit the fx target, which is unknown, and it also tries to fit the deviations in terms of the every point, the deviation sigma x noise also, and that gets things becomes very bad with respect to the higher order polynomial. So this is a scenario where you have noisy data. I will immediately show that noise is not the only thing that you need to be worried about while overfitting. In case of general data also you can overfit, but that's a different types of noise that we might encounter there. So the definition of overfitting says, so before that, let me say you that overfitting is a respective term, that overfitting with respect to what. So therefore, I can say that I have two hypotheses, G1x and G2x. I say that G1 overfits, but G2 doesn't overfit. G1 overfits than G2, when I will find that whenever I go from G1 to G2, I find my E in is reducing and I find my E out is increasing. Then I will say that in that case, I define that G2 overfits. Because when I move from G1 to G2 and make it a complicated, maybe a hypothesis, I see that I have a drastically improved performance in E in, but similarly, I have a very bad performance with respect to E out, as we see in this curve as well. So then we define that our overfitting means this G2, the hypothesis that we derived, is overfitting. Okay, with respect to G1. Maybe G1 overfits with respect to some other, but since it's overfitting, so it should be some kind of a comparative behavior between two hypotheses. So let us now first look some of the examples, then we derive out of the theoretical part. So two things we will do, as I have shared, that noise is one of the culprit that we already understand because our hypothesis tries to fit in noise. However, we will also try to see instead of noise, if we can we go with the overfitting phenomenon or not. So here are two examples. The top figure, this one, is basically the correct target function is in blue. So here the correct target function, let's say the correct target function is a 10th order target. So whatever my correct target function is a 10th order target. That I don't know. I don't know about the target function. But let's say I have some knowledge that it's a 10th order target, it fits with some noise like this. The other example that we will take is a 50th order target function. And the good thing is that it doesn't have any noise. Now let us try to figure out that, let's say I have two kinds of learners. And that means a learner which has trying to fit in a second order polynomial hypothesis, and another learner which is in the red here is trying to fit it in the 10th order polynomial. For example, let's say the learner in the red is thinking that maybe the target is a 10th order, let me fit it with the 10th order polynomial. So the hypothesis set of one learner consists of only second order polynomials. The hypothesis set of other learners consists of all 10th order polynomials. Remember, both hypothesis set are infinite because the coefficient can be continuous and you can take any second order polynomial, many such equations. So therefore, if you try to fit like this, now with respect to the blue curve you see here, and with respect to the blue curve you see the red curve as well as the green curve, we will find that the 10th order polynomial there is a chance that it may overfit because it is trying too hard to fit the points, and indeed noise is there, and hence noise is also coming into picture, which is tries to overfit, as we see in the small example. Whereas here you see 10th order polynomial target can also be fall short because it's a 50th order target that we need to reach. So any 10th order polynomial cannot also fit in. Second order polynomial is, let's say somebody tries with the luck that let us try with second order what happens. But however, here you see the way it fits the 10th order polynomial looking at the 15 points. So all of these cases, I have given 15 points in both cases. So it tries to fit in too tightly, and there are positions where with respect to the actual curve, it is making too much error because these positions, if you figure out, they are close to kind of infinity, shoots up. So that you will shoot up your error as well. And indeed, if we try to write down that how is the performance, first let's try to write down the noisy one, the performance of noisy one. Noisy data set. So let's say this is for the second order and this is for the 10th order. And how do we perform with, let's say, E in and E out? Now I have the figure with me. You can just experiment with any of the linear regression techniques or with second order and fourth order and get these figures with you. Obviously 10th order polynomial does better in E because if the target is 10th order, this will obviously better fit for the given data point that I have. But here you see it's horrible in E out. The main reason being, if you look at the blue curve, the error is with respect to the blue curve, and there are positions like this positions, it shoots up. It shoots up so much that it indeed carries this kind of a bad out of sample generalization. And on the other hand, if we try to see the performance of noiseless set, that is this one, the same thing we will try to see here, that let's say this is second order, 10th order, E in, E out. You will see the first one in the second order, drastically it also tries to reduce it very well, and depending on the data point distribution, it does very well. 10th order is marvelous. It does it 10 to the power minus 5. It's marvelously fitting it. However, if you go for E out, it is this. And do you know what the experiment figure out of the 10th order? 7680. Why this is so? As I have pointed out, look at these positions. These positions are kind of comparing infinity with this point. In this position, you are comparing infinity with here. You're blowing up in this position. So in this position, you are comparing this with kind of infinity sort of blow up. So this position makes rise of the E out generalization. So what does it mean? It means that, see, if H2 to H10, if I push harder, then I find out the out of sample performance in both the cases is actually going bad. That means that the 10th order polynomial in case of noisy data as well as in case of noiseless data, in both cases is trying to fit it hard. And in both cases, we find out there is an overfit by your hypothesis of 10th order. Agreed with this point?
Yes, sir.
Sir, can you please repeat the blue curve with respect to the blue curve? Why it is just infinity? For red curve, I can understand.
No, blue curve, it is not a kind of an infinity. Blue curve fits well. You see 0.12 is the expected E out.
Hmm. Oh, blue. The green
Blue is
color mark is not for the infinity.
which one?
No, no, you are marking the green
No, I am
color
saying
with.
that see, this curve is looking like I cut it off. So it shoots up
Hmm.
like this. No?
It is infinity, huh?
Not infinity. I mean, it's a huge number. So that means what? When
Hmm.
you try to compare and come out with the E out, so see, this is the point where you are comparing. So this is the point when it relates to the actual point value here. Your
Hmm.
red curve is trying to compare this distance. It also comes in here in the E out.
Hmm.
That's why this is becoming a huge quantity, because see, how do you fit in? If you look at here, what is your error? If you look at this, you fit, this is
Hmm.
your G, and this is the actual F. So every time this is your error you are making, and you are trying to have a expected E out. So
Hmm.
here also, this is the red is for H10, the green is for H2, and the blue
Hmm.
is the correct F. So blue is the F. Every time this blue is the F, the target function.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
each point there, what is the E out that you are making it? That is how you come across here with respect to the actual position of that point in the F curve. That is your E out that you make.
Yes.
And it turns out very bad due to the fact that, see, not everywhere it is so bad, but these positions are killing you.
Hmm.
That's my. The reason
Okay.
being, it is trying to fit in a 10th order polynomial, even
Hmm.
without noise, but it's a 50th order target. You cannot fit in within 10th order polynomial. So
Hmm.
somewhere down the line, maybe if you see that from H2, if I have gone through H3, I could have done better. Maybe my second order, the third order E in and E out may be better than second order E in and out.
Second order,
So,
huh?
so then this is not overfitting. You move forward, this is not overfitting. Suddenly, at some
Hmm.
point, maybe H7, you will find that this is overfitting. From H7 onwards, you are overfitting.
Okay.
So that
Hmm.
is the point, that at a position of complicating the hypothesis, so
Hmm.
two takeaways. two takeaway from this slide. Takeaway number one is that even if you have noisy as noiseless, you can overfit. It is not the case that noise comes into the picture to overfit. It is also the case that your target function is so complex that your hypothesis set cannot model it.
Hmm.
So you may overfit. And the second point is the fact that even if you try to find it, you try to go harder, there may be a point that beyond which you are trying too hard to fit in, and there are positions are actually killing you
Hmm.
because you are
These
only
are, hmm.
seeing the fitting in terms of the eyes of the data points that are given to you, nothing else. You cannot see the whole space of activity. You can only see these 15 points.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so
Okay.
that's the motto of this whole understanding. So therefore,
Oh.
to summarize is that somebody choose this H2, which is, I will say that the hypothesis chosen by H2, let me write it as this is, I got G10. I'm suffixing it so that, and this is the hypothesis that I got second order. Similarly, learning 50th order target, this is my G2, and this is the hypothesis that I get G10, the 10th order learning. Now see, with respect to the learning curves, I hope you'd still remember it. So we plotted like this now with respect to learning curves. So this is my expected error side. This is my number of data points. And this is, let's say, for the simple model, that is for the second order. And as you can see, since the model is simple, so we will get a sufficient error. That's for not an that's not an issue, because if I go for a simple model to fit a 10th order polynomial, there will be error, and the error will be huge. Rather, if we go for a complicated model, so this is the same n and this is the same expected error. If we go for a complicated model, maybe the expected error will be less, because the complicated model can definitely fit well. Now the question is that how you are going up with the E in. So your E in the expected error E in may be going like this, and your E out may be coming down like this. You remember, right? Last day we also discussed this curve with the simple model and the complicated model.
Yes, sir.
Now see, there is a point that, let me shade it out, maybe with this. There will be a position here, let's say till this point here. I hope it is shading, but I don't know whether you can figure it out or not.
Yes, sir.
Maybe there is a position here. It is trying to overfit into this position, and later it gets stabilized. Because you see why it does so? Because you have less number of data points and you are trying too hard to fit them. Here it will be more clearer. Let's say if I have a less number, it's a 10th order polynomial. So there will be a position where you just perfectly fit everything without any E in, and then suddenly you start building up with your E in, because these many points may be less than your VC dimension, you are exactly fitting them. And similarly, if you look at the E out curve, it looks like this. So this is your E out. So that means what? That there are positions here. So again, let me try to blur those things, maybe in a different color. I don't know why no color is working. There will be a position, let's say till this point,
The second curve.
where you see that you are reducing E out, but your E in, but your generalization is too bad because you are trying too hard to fit them. Here is the region where you might be overfitting with respect to the error. Then gradually you reduce it. The other variation of the curve, as we have seen, that maybe your E in, if you try to put in, maybe your E in is reducing, as we have seen, and suddenly there is a point beyond which your yacht starts increasing. So here at the point you started overfitting in this side. So this is with respect to only error and the number of epochs that we projected earlier. Okay, so
Sir,
the whole, yes, any question?
yes, sir. So I'm asking the second curve you drawn,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that is for which order hypothesis? Like the
Let's say
target over
10th.
here is
Let's say 10th order. It's a complicated model, so it's a 10th order, and this is a simple model. Let's say second order.
the target is 10th order in this second case.
Target is, let's say in both the cases target is the same. Either you take this one or you take this one. Anything, but target is same for both.
Okay.
So the question is that in complicated model, when you have less data points, so you will try to perfectly fit them. That will lead to overfitting, which happens in the right side top figure.
Yes, sir.
That's why your E out initially is kind of infinity. I mean, it's huge. Gradually, when you get more acquainted with the distribution of more and more points, then you are fitting it better. Similarly, for the simple model, it is also the case. Maybe the shaded region will be thinner than in case of complicated model, because simple model, when you take, you have only two, so you can fit at most 3 points. So beyond 3 points, you will have to somehow approximate, and then the generalization factor will come in. Okay.
Yes, sir.
However, the one more point to clarify here is in this case, is it really no noise is there? So just the question that is it really no noise, because we are saying no noise for the data point. But if you see carefully, there is a noise which says that the noise is you are trying to fit higher order polynomial by approximating it with lower order hypothesis, right? This is 50th order you are trying to fit, 50th order, and you are trying to fit using 10th order hypothesis. So what does it mean? If it is a 50th order, 10th order hypothesis itself will not be apt to find out actual behavior. So suppose your target function looks like this, and you have a restricted version of something that will look like this. Okay, or maybe at best you can do like this. So even if there will be gaps, that is you are incapable of due to your restrictions in the hypothesis. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
therefore, here no noise is wrong. We call such kind of a thing is a deterministic noise, where your hypothesis is limited, and that limitation will give rise. Whereas in this case, since we know that we have a noise, we call it as a stochastic noise. Obviously noise is stochastic, I mean there is no doubt in that, but just to have the term going in machine learning parlance, we call it as a deterministic versus stochastic noise. All right. Okay, so whatever we pointed out in terms of I would say intuitively, let us try to write it formally. So we have this target function, and we have a quantity noise. As in this case, there is a data and there could be noise itself inside the data. So hence this function, this is your target function, even if this function cannot fit every point, because this is basically the noise of the point. So not all points could be fit in. And if you take a Gaussian distribution, this could be kind of a this type of noise. The energy of the noise, we sometimes call in machine learning, the energy of the noise or the intensity of the noise could be from a Gaussian distribution. If you take the noises of like this, This is your sigma parameter, and this looks like this. However, if you a little bit explore this thing, what is your fx? It is nothing but a polynomial of, let's say, qf dimension. I mean qf highest order. So therefore, you can say my q equal to 0 to qf, and it is aq x to the power q, because my fx is a polynomial. So this is my fx plus this epsilon of x. So where obviously I targeted this one as my noise level equal to sigma square, taking it as a Gaussian noise or something. So with respect to my data points that is given, so with respect to n data points, I have this kind of an equation given. And sometimes to explore over the noise, what we do in practice, we call it normalization. We normalize it because these are the coefficients, and we take it as a Lagrange coefficient so that it normalizes and get to unity. I mean unity in the sense it's not one. Let me write it unity, and then this term blows up, and you can see the impact of noise with respect to y. That's what we do, and to just see noise in terms of the behavioral pattern of your uh, experiment. I mean, it's a practical thing. It's not a theoretical thing, though we express in theory. And the normalization is usually these coefficients are Lagrange coefficients we take. I mean, we don't want to get into this but this is what we are trying to project. Now, overfitting. If we try to measure the overfitting, usually what
The
we
noise
do
is a
is,
kind of variance over here, right?
yeah, noise is a kind of variance over the distribution of the data. That's why I told about the Gaussian. See,
Okay, sir.
your data has a distribution. Let's say the noise also has a distribution, and it gets superimposed into the data to get rise your data points. Get it? Suppose noise is also a distribution. So you have a probability distribution with respect to noise for every point x, right? And you have a probability distribution. So this is the distribution of the noise, and this is the distribution of the data. So when you superimpose that, that is the distribution for your data points, actual distribution of your data points in this canvas. Get it?
Okay, sir.
So just for the sake of understanding you this expression, I took a Gaussian. You could take something else also. So you can see the overfit measure with respect to this particular experiment that we have done, that with respect to noisy data, we try to fit in the 10th order versus second order polynomial. And 10th order polynomial provides us a very bad estimation of your E out and with respect to second order. So effectively, we compute this to denote how much your hypothesis. So obviously here G10 belongs to my 10th order polynomial data, and G2 belongs to my second order polynomial data. So this is just the measure of hypothesis people try to do and try to compare whether it minimizes or not. So this is for the stochastic noise case. Now we have also you can put an experiment about how it looks like. You can see with respect to the noise level, if you put the data points, the red are tremendously overfitting and the blue is the safe region. So you can see as the data point is less, right? If your data point is less, you have a chance of overfitting because the data point may not be representative of the actual function. There are very few. Sine curve, remember, if I give two data points, you will get a straight line, right? I mean, to best fit it. So that is not a proper fit. So that's why we get overfitting, because we, instead of, if we also reduce E in further, we get a huge E out. Similarly, if your noise level increases, as you can see this curve, you go into red region very easily if your noise level increases. It starts to get better if you have more data points and less noise, because more data point, less noise means you have a higher chance of fitting those data points properly in terms of the stochastic noise that we have. On the right hand side, you see the similar kind of a nature, though this lower part I will explain more. Here, if you have more data points, obviously you'll fit more with, but if you have a target complexity more and more, then you are restricted by your choice of hypothesis to fit in that target complexity. So target complexity means the order of the polynomial. Suppose I want to fit 100 order polynomial and I only give you 50 data points. So it's with 50 data points, I mean, you can at most get a, I mean, you can at most get a 49th order polynomial. So you cannot approximate this one. So you get a overfitting. Similarly, here this low part is very interesting. This low part says that see you have less target complexity, but your number of points is so less, still you overfit. Gradually, it gets better. And in the right side, when you have more data points but less target complexity to fit, so you can actually fit very well. So that's so. So the takeaway is that if your number of training examples or data points is high, this implies the chances of overfitting goes down. Second thing is that if your stochastic noise, that is the actual noise of in the data point, if it goes high, then your overfitting goes high. And the third thing we also see, if your deterministic noise, which means that your target is so sophisticated that you cannot even think of fitting it with respect to the hypothesis allowed to you, that is your deterministic noise, then that also goes out. So this is how about you can find out with the experiments. You can do it in your own, this experiments with any data or any of the projects that you are doing, you will find similar kind of graphs. Okay. So now
Yes, sir.
a little bit more conceptual behavior about noise and variance with respect to these data points and these kind of overfitting scenario. So let us recall the decomposition of noise. So if you recall the decomposition of noise, so here we got, so there will be an expectation S outside it. I am not taking it. I am taking for one point X. You can have to expect, give an expectation of X outside. So the inside part, this is your old variance, remember, plus this is your bias with respect to the average minus fx. This was your bias. So if you remember that this is your variance of the point x and this is your bias of the point x. Now if I assume there is a noisy part over here, so my y is, that means the points that are given is basically fx plus the noise. Well, let me assume that the average expected value of this noise, if I assume Gaussian distribution or anything, of this noise E of x is equal to 0. So suppose this is my assumption of the noise that is given to me. The same equation I can reiterate, right? The same thing I can reiterate instead of fx. Now I will have y. Instead of all the positions that I have fx, I can have y, and this is the final thing that I wish to do. So that means I now have minus this data point that are given to me. What is the expected difference? This I will do it in the same way, but this is the thing that I will now look for, which is equal to, as you can see that what I will do, you know now, right? Because here I will just do a plus average hypothesis minus average hypothesis in between this place, and then therefore finally when you look this will be now the expectation of d with respect to sigma, because I have a noise term now, and it will be this plus, or rather let me do not close this bracket right away, g bar x minus fx square plus sigma x square. I am just expanding with this orange and blue together. So this square plus this square plus this square, plus you have, you have the cross terms. And if you take the error being the squared sum error, you also know my cross terms mostly vanishes. That we have already done in the last class. So where we will point to with this analysis is the fact that here finally, when we go out with respect to expectation of x at the end, so finally I will have expected value of dx here g dx minus g bar x square plus expected value of x, because here I could eliminate this one because this term doesn't have any variable which is of sigma x. This term also doesn't have any variable which is of sigma x as well as d. So I could only have x with it. This term has sigma as well as x both. So now you try to find out, this is your old variance. This was your old bias. And this was, according to us, if I take a Gaussian, this is kind of a noise. So now see what is the physical interpretation of these factors. Obviously, this is your stochastic noise, because this is the imposed stochastic noise and this variance with respect to the Gaussian curve here. So it's a stochastic noise. This, if you look, this is what? See, this is the best hypothesis that you can choose. This is the actual target function. So for example, the actual target function looks like this, but your best hypothesis can be like this. So everywhere there is a deterministic noise that you cannot model by your limited power of the hypothesis. Hence, we also call this as a deterministic noise. Okay. So last day, when somebody asked me about that, what is the relation with overfitting and this bias variance trade-off, I think it is now clear. See, variance is, we cannot eliminate the factor. Variance is a separate issue, because variance is the fact that given the data set, expected value of your hypothesis that you will choose, how far it is than the best hypothesis that I can select from that data set. That's the variance. But this fitting issue comes in about the power of your hypothesis set. The more power your hypothesis set have, the bias will be lesser. That means if instead of this line, if I could give you some better kind of a fitting weapon, then you might have fit better. Even some better kind of a fitting weapon, you might have fit better. So that is what the bias is. And it is essentially the limitations of the gap between the hypothesis power and the target function, which is the estimation of the bias, is our deterministic noise now, because this is the limitation where we may overfit due to the restricted power. Whereas this is totally a new term that comes in due to the impact of noise inside it. Okay, agreed? The last day, whoever asked the question, somewhat clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But remember, please try to do 1-2 problems taking the value of gx and something. You can just take fx equal to something x plus 1. You take it and see and take some points which are a little bit bad and try to fit it within hypothesis. See, x plus 1, try to fit it within a constant line, just like hypothesis, and take the expectation value and see the impact of bias and noise and also the deterministic stochastic noise and all. Take an example and just do your calculation yourself, because otherwise it will not come to you directly. I mean, how these calculations are evolving and how we are getting the answer. And whenever you got an expectation, If it is a continuous function, just take within the range R1 to R2 x into x plus 1 dx. If I have to took the expectation of fx, for the expectation of fx, just go by this way. So that is the fundamental theory behind bias. So it is so when you are doing a project and when you are solving a problem, just try to look for whether you are reducing E in but still your E out is going on expanding. So then you need to see how does your data have noises or not. If that is not the case, then you might have to argue that maybe I am overdoing it or I am underdoing it too much. My hypothesis is not actually capturing the actual target function, which may be higher order polynomial. So in that case, you need to prevent it by something. So those some things are, one is regularization, one is validation. That will be our next two lectures topics. So let me just give you kind of a platter kind, which comes a starter kind of a thing. Regularization is nothing but putting the brakes. So as we have seen that when early stopping criteria, as we have seen that when E in goes down, somewhere down the line, if we sense that E out is not changing so much, we need to put the brakes. And you will be amazed to see that what does this brake impact. So this is here, it is unrestrained fitting of data. So I want to fit it. So this is a fourth order polynomial. I want to fit it. You have seen this graph. You are doing very bad. Here, it's a restricted fit. Okay, and by restricted fit, I mean that still my red line, this red line still is a fourth order polynomial. Still is a fourth order polynomial, because if you look at the polynomial behavior, see, if you go for a second order polynomial, it will look like this. If you go for a third order polynomial, it will look like this. If you go for a fourth order polynomial, it will be steeper. This will be steeper. Fifth order polynomial, it will be further steeper. This will be further steeper, and it will move on. Right? This way we go. So this is x square. This may be x cube. This may be x to the power 4, x to the power 5, x to the power 6, x to the power 7, and all that. So what we did is that instead of fourth order polynomial just try to fit everything, we put a little bit of break. So here what we did is we put breaks, so called, but the breaks is not drastic. Let's say 1% of the break we do. So we started to break here, and after 10 kilometers we stop. So that break means that the polynomial equations that you figure out, I equal to 0 to q, ai x to the power I try to put a very little small break, let's say of delta amount with this. So my ai will now be ai my plus minus delta. And what does it give it is that this. See, now the red curve is much more acceptable, right? So this phenomenon, we call it as regularization. And the other phenomenon that we will also discuss is called a validation. That's something you have already tested with in your project, because you know cross validation and all that, right? So we reserve a set of data, check the bottom line with respect to those set of data. So we have a training set and test set. We reserve a set of data and check the bottom line. So that's the difference. So this is put break. This is check bottom line. So these two are the factors that how we could deal with the overfitting. These are the two things that we will cover in the next week, 2 lectures. Okay, so that's it for today. And just one announcement before you leave. So if you have questions, then I will do that afterwards.
Sir,
Yeah.
can you go on the previous page where you wrote the expectation formula?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, the below one. Sir, here it is expectation of x, right? Because if fx is the probability density function, then it should be x multiplied with the fx, right? Means it should be the probability of x instead of probability of fx.
I couldn't understand the question. Just come again.
Actually, Actually, if the fx is probability density function and we want to find out the expectation of ex, like sorry, expectation of x, then it should be x multiply integration of x multiplied with fx, right?
Yes, that's what I did. No, I mean x into x plus 1 dx. I mean that's what I also showed in the first slide as well.
So, sir, it should be expectation of x
This
instead of expectation of fx, right? I'm saying this.
it's expectation of x.
Yeah, but you wrote the expectation of fx.
So here, it's expectation of the function is this. This is the formula of the expectation, right?
If fx is
Oh, you are
probability,
saying that, yeah. If fx is a probability, I mean density function, right? That's your query. Yeah,
if
if fx is
fx
a prob.
if fx is a probability density function, then expectation of x will be x multiplied with fx in the integration part.
Yes, this you are saying that expectation will be x multiplied by fx.
If if, if fx
If
is a
fx is a
probability density
density,
function and we are
correct,
finding expectation of x, but
correct, correct.
here we are finding expectation of fx, then it should be fx multiplied with some gx, right? Some
fx.
gx may be probability density function over here for the fx.
No. See here is the expected value of the output E out with respect to different data points. So I have not computed the expectation. The computation of expectation is as you are saying. I put it till that point, right?
Okay.
See, I have not computed it. The computation exactly. You are right. Suppose I have to compute this one. I need to put here x into this function dx integration.
Yeah.
Okay, that's correct. I have not computed it. No? Inside I kept it as it is.
Okay, so and this is the last point the last slide.
Okay.
In this last slide, what is the second point? The validation.
Oh,
The
the
first is
validation.
regularization. Like we are
This one.
finding.
Regularization is this one. We
Yeah,
just
we are.
shown an example.
Yeah. I got that point. We are trying to fitting in particular region first, so it is more accurate. And what is the validation?
So validation means what you do in your project. You keep separate out a set of data, and that is your bottom line. And then whatever you gather from the rest of the data as training, you try to validate over a part of data, and then try to shuffle this validation, cross validate, and try to figure out that which is, I mean, at which point you need to stop.
Okay.
Okay, we will see theoretical implications of all this in next two lectures in greater details.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir. So hello.
I can hear you.
Yes, sir. So in the previous slide where you have written fx equal to x plus 1, so that fx is probability density function, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I
sir,
give an example. I'm saying that suppose you want to fit something. I mean, let's say your target function is x cube plus x square plus x plus 1, and you want to fit it within second order polynomial x square, let's f gx equal to x square. Then try to compute the noise, variance, and all that.
so then fx will be probability density function, right?
Yes. I mean, fx is a target function rather. I mean, to be more accurate.
But it will be PDF, right? The
PDF.
nature will be probability
PDF.
density function.
Why? Because you are given why the nature is probability density function? Because you are given the data points from that probability function, right? You are given the data points generated by that function. You do not know.
Yes, actually, I was confused because x plus 1 is not a valid PDF,
Correct.
so that's why.
Yes. You correct. Yeah, it's not. You'd go for an x square plus something. I mean, which is a valid PDF. Fx equal to
No,
x
sir.
square is.
Yes, sir.
Yes. I agree. I just gave Harili an example that you try out with certain functions.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Let me stop recording.